She spilled coffee all over the Millionaire CEO on her first day. He fell in love instantly. Before we start, leave a comment and tell us what city are you watching from. And at the end, don't forget to rate this story from 0 to 10. Enjoy. The scalding coffee hit Lucas Blackwood's crisp white shirt like a tidal wave of disaster. Steam rose from the expensive fabric as the dark liquid spread across his chest, and for a moment, the entire lobby of Blackwood Industries fell into stunned silence. Oh my God, I'm so sorry." The voice belonged to a young woman with wild auburn curls escaping from what had probably started as a neat bun that morning. Her green eyes were wide with horror as she stared at the mess she'd created on what was clearly a very expensive suit. Lucas looked down at his ruined shirt, then back at the woman who was frantically patting at his chest with coffee-soaked napkins, making the situation exponentially worse. Any other day, any other person, and heads would have rolled. Lucas Blackwood was known throughout the corporate world as ruthless, demanding, and utterly intolerant of incompetence. But something about the genuine distress on this woman's face stopped the cutting remarks that usually came so naturally to him. "Stop," he said quietly, catching her wrists gently. "You're making it worse." She froze, looking up at him with those impossibly green eyes, and Lucas felt something shift in his chest that had nothing to do with the hot coffee. Up close, he could see the light dusting of freckles across her nose, the way her bottom lip trembled slightly, and how her cheeks had flushed a deep pink with embarrassment. "I'm Sophia Chen," she blurted out, as if her name might somehow undo the catastrophe. "It's my first day. I'm supposed to be starting in the marketing department, but I got lost, and the elevator was confusing, and I was already running late because my alarm didn't go off, and then I saw the coffee cart, and I thought maybe caffeine would help me think straight, but clearly that was a terrible idea because now I've probably gotten fired before I've even found my desk, and—" "Breathe," Lucas interrupted, surprising himself with the gentleness in his voice. "You're hyperventilating." Sophia took a shaky breath, then another. Around them, the lobby had returned to its usual bustle, though Lucas caught several employees stealing glances in their direction. He'd have to deal with the gossip later, but right now his attention was entirely focused on the woman in front of him. "Mr. Blackwood?" His assistant Richard appeared at his elbow, holding a fresh shirt that seemed to have materialized from nowhere. "Your 9 o'clock is waiting upstairs. Reschedule it," Lucas said, without taking his eyes off Sophia. Richard blinked in surprise. Lucas Blackwood never rescheduled meetings, especially not for someone who'd just ruined his shirt. "Sir?" "You heard me, and send someone from marketing down to collect Miss Chen." "Actually," Sophia said, finding her voice again, "I can find my own way. I've caused enough trouble for one morning. I'm really, truly sorry about your shirt. If you give me your dry cleaning receipt, I'll pay for it. It might take me a few months, but I promise I'll cover the cost." Lucas studied her face, noting the determined set of her jaw despite the embarrassment still coloring her cheeks. Most people who encountered him were either terrified or trying to impress him. Sophia Chen seemed to be neither. She was clearly mortified by what had happened, but there was something refreshingly honest about her rambling apology and her immediate offer to make things right. "What's your background, Miss Chen?" he asked, ignoring Richard's increasingly confused expression. "Marketing communications from Northwestern, 3 years at a boutique agency in Chicago, working on campaigns for small businesses. I specialize in authentic storytelling and building genuine connections between brands and consumers." The words came out in a rush, as if she'd rehearsed them, which she probably had for her interview. "And what made you want to work at Blackwood Industries?" Sophia hesitated, and Lucas found himself genuinely curious about her answer. Most people gave him the standard responses about wanting to work for an industry leader or being drawn to the company's innovative approach. But Sophia seemed to be actually considering the question. "Honestly, your company has a reputation for being brilliant but cold, all efficient systems and profit margins but no soul. I thought maybe I could help change that. Help people see that there are real human beings behind all those impressive quarterly reports." Richard made a small choking sound. No one spoke to Lucas Blackwood like that. No one suggested his company lacked soul, especially not someone who just dumped coffee all over him. But Lucas found himself smiling. Actually smiling, which was rare enough that Richard looked like he might need medical attention. "Interesting perspective," Lucas said. "And you think you can bring soul to a soulless company?" I think every company has soul, Sophia replied, some of her initial panic fading as she warmed to the topic. Sometimes it just gets buried under spreadsheets and shareholder meetings, but it's there. It's in the people who work, late to solve problems, who celebrate each other's successes, who care about doing good work even when no one's watching. I'm good at finding those stories and helping other people see them too. Lucas was quiet for a long moment, studying her face. There was passion there, conviction that went deeper than career ambition. When was the last time someone had spoken to him about work with genuine enthusiasm instead of fear or false flattery? Richard, he said finally, have someone from facilities clean up this mess and get me that fresh shirt. Of course, sir, and Miss Chen will report directly to me for the next 2 weeks. Both Richard and Sophia stared at him in shock. Sir, Richard managed, if Miss Chen thinks our company lacks soul, then she can work with me to prove otherwise. Consider it a special project. 2 weeks to show me these stories she's so passionate about finding. Sophia's eyes widened. You want me to work directly with you? But I was supposed to be in marketing, and I just destroyed your shirt, and I don't even know where my desk is supposed to be. Your desk will be in the executive suite. You'll shadow me, observe how the company really works from the top down, and then tell me what stories you think are worth telling. Lucas straightened his shoulders, feeling more energized than he had in months. Unless you think that's too much of a challenge. The question was clearly a dare, and something flickered in Sophia's green eyes that looked suspiciously like determination. No challenge too big, she said, lifting her chin. But I should warn you, I don't pull punches when it comes to honest feedback. I wouldn't expect anything less from someone brave enough to tell a CEO his company has no soul within 10 minutes of meeting him. Technically, I told you that after spilling coffee on you, so I think the bravery was more about desperation at that point. Lucas laughed, a real laugh that seemed to surprise him as much as it did everyone else within earshot. 2 weeks, Miss Chen. Let's see what you can do. As Richard led Sophia toward the elevators, Lucas watched her go. She turned back once, giving him a small wave that was equal parts grateful and nervous. Something about that simple gesture sent an unexpected warmth spreading through his chest. He had no idea what had possessed him to make such an impulsive decision. Lucas Blackwood was methodical, calculated, and never acted on gut instincts when it came to business, but something about Sophia Chen had gotten under his skin in a way he couldn't quite explain. 2 weeks. What could possibly happen in 2 weeks? As the elevator doors closed behind Sophia's bright smile, Lucas had the strangest feeling that his carefully ordered world was about to become much more complicated, and for the first time in years, he found himself looking forward to the chaos. The next morning, Eleanor arrived at Sterling Enterprises with her head held high, despite the knot of anxiety in her stomach. She had spent the entire night replaying her conversation with Alexander, analyzing every word, every glance. The way he had looked at her when she challenged him about his employees' living situations had been intense, almost vulnerable. She settled into her temporary desk in the marketing department, determined to prove herself beyond the coffee incident. Her supervisor, Janet, a sharp woman in her 50s, handed her a stack of campaign proposals. These need reviewing by noon, Janet said curtly. Mr. Sterling specifically requested you handle them. Eleanor's pulse quickened. Alexander was already involving her in important work. She dove into the proposals, her MBA training kicking in as she analyzed market demographics and budget allocations. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice the tall figure approaching until a familiar voice spoke. Working hard already? She looked up to find Alexander standing beside her desk, impeccably dressed in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. Other employees glanced their way with undisguised curiosity. Mr. Sterling, she said, standing quickly, I'm reviewing the Q4 proposals. I have some thoughts. Walk with me, he interrupted, his tone professional but his eyes warm. I'd like to hear them. They walked toward the elevator, and Elena noticed how other employees straightened when Alexander passed, their conversations stopping mid-sentence. The power he wielded was tangible, almost intimidating. The Henderson proposal is solid, she began as they stepped into the elevator, but the budget allocation seems disproportionate. They're spending 60% on traditional media when their target demographic is primarily digital natives. Alexander pressed the button for the executive floor, his attention completely focused on her words. Continue. I'd recommend shifting. 40% of that budget to social media and influencer partnerships. The ROI data supports it. She pulled out the papers, showing him her notes. Here, if you look at these numbers. Their fingers brushed as he took the documents, sending an electric current up her arm. She saw his jaw tighten slightly, suggesting he felt it too. Impressive analysis, he said, his voice slightly rougher. You've identified the same issues I had with that proposal. The elevator opened to reveal the executive floor, all glass offices and sleek modern furniture. Alexander's assistant, a poised woman named Patricia, looked surprised to see Elena with him. Patricia, please reschedule my 10:30, Alexander said. Ms. Rodriguez and I need to discuss these proposals further. Elena followed him into his corner office, trying not to gape at the floor-to-ceiling windows offering a spectacular view of the city. His desk was massive, made of dark wood, with only a laptop and a single-framed photo she couldn't quite see. Sit, he said, gesturing to the leather chairs across from his desk. Instead of sitting behind his desk, he chose the chair beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and masculine. Tell me about yourself, Elena, he said, leaning back. Your resume shows you graduated top of your MBA class, but you've been unemployed for 6 months. Why? The question hit like a punch to the gut. Elena had hoped to avoid this topic, but his direct gaze made evasion impossible. I was engaged, she said carefully. My fiancé was also in business, and he didn't want me working for his competitors. He convinced me to turn down several offers, promising he'd help me find something better after our wedding. Alexander's expression darkened. And 3 weeks before the wedding, I found him in our apartment with his secretary. Apparently, their relationship had been going on for months. She kept her voice steady, professional, but couldn't hide the slight tremor. The job market became difficult after that. References were complicated. He sabotaged your career prospects, Alexander said, his voice cold with anger that wasn't directed at her. I suspect so, but I'm here now and I'm ready to prove myself. Alexander studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes intense. You defended me yesterday. Why? The question caught her off guard. What do you mean? When Patricia mentioned the board meeting, you could have stayed silent. Instead, you challenged my reasoning about employee welfare. Most people in your position would have agreed with everything I said. Elena felt heat rise in her cheeks. I believe in speaking truth to power, even when it's inconvenient. Maybe especially then. A slow smile spread across Alexander's face, transforming his features from intimidating to devastating. That's exactly why I need you here. Mr. Sterling. Alexander, he corrected. When we're alone, call me Alexander. The intimacy of his request sent butterflies dancing in her stomach. Alexander, I should get back to work. Janet is expecting these reviews by noon. Janet can wait. He stood and moved to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. I have a proposition for you. Elena's breath caught. What kind of proposition? I need someone I can trust on my senior team. Someone who won't just tell me what they think I want to. Here, he turned to face her. I'm offering you a position as Director of Strategic Marketing reporting directly to me. Eleanor's mind reeled. That's an incredible opportunity, but I've been here exactly 1 day. People will think what they always think when someone rises quickly in a company, Alexander said, moving closer. But their opinions don't matter. Your work speaks for itself. And if I accept, you'll have significant autonomy, a substantial salary increase and the chance to implement the changes you suggested. You'll also be working very closely with me. The way he said the last part made Elena's pulse race. There was something in his voice, in the way he looked at her, that suggested professional collaboration wasn't the only thing on his mind. I need time to think about it, she said, standing to leave. Alexander stepped closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact. Take all the time you need, but Elena, yes? Don't let fear of what others might think keep you from taking what you deserve. Elena left his office in a daze, her mind spinning. The promotion would solve all her financial problems and give her the career she'd always wanted. But working closely with Alexander Sterling felt dangerous in ways that had nothing to do with office politics. Over the next few days, she threw herself into work, staying late to finish projects and consistently exceeding expectations. Alexander seemed to find excuses to stop by her desk, discussing campaigns and strategy with an intensity that left her breathless. On Thursday evening, she was alone in the office when he appeared beside her cubicle. "Everyone else has gone home," he observed. "I wanted to finish the Morrison account analysis," she replied, not looking up from her laptop. "It's 8:30, Eleanor. I know what time it is." Alexander pulled up a chair beside her, his proximity making it impossible to concentrate on the spreadsheet. "What are you afraid of?" The question was so direct, so personal, that Elena finally looked at him. In the dim office lighting, his features were softer, more approachable. "I'm not afraid," she lied. "You are. You're afraid that accepting my offer will somehow compromise your integrity, that people will assume we're involved personally." Elena's cheeks burned. "Aren't we?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Alexander's eyes searched her face, and Elena felt as if he could see straight through to her soul. "Not yet," he said quietly. "But I'd be lying if I said I wasn't hoping we might be." Elena's laptop screen dimmed as they stared at each other, the office around them fading into insignificance. She was acutely aware of everything about him. The way his shirt sleeve was rolled up to reveal his forearm, the slight shadow of stubble on his jaw, the warmth radiating from his body. "Alexander, this is complicated," she whispered. "The best things usually are." He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was gentle, reverent, and Elena felt herself leaning into it, despite her reservations. "Have dinner with me tomorrow," he said. "Not as your boss, not as a business meeting, just as Alexander and Elena." Before she could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed through the office. Alexander, immediately, pulled back, his expression shifting to professional neutrality as a security guard rounded the corner. "Evening, Mr. Sterling," the guard said. "Just doing final rounds." "Of course, Jim. Ms. Rodriguez and I were just finishing up." Elena quickly saved her work and gathered her things, hyper-aware of the tension crackling between them. As they waited for the elevator, Alexander stood close enough that she could feel the heat from his body. "Think about dinner," he said quietly as the elevator doors opened. In the parking garage, Elena fumbled with her car keys, her hands shaking slightly. The evening had changed something fundamental between them, crossing a line from professional interest to something much more personal and dangerous. As she drove home, her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Sweet dreams, Elena." She pulled over, staring at the message. Alexander Sterling, one of the most powerful men in the city, was pursuing her. The thought should have been thrilling, but all Elena could think about was how badly things had ended with Marcus, how completely she had trusted the wrong person. But as she lay in bed that night, she couldn't stop replaying the moment when Alexander had touched her face, the way his voice had dropped when he asked her to dinner. Despite her fears, despite every rational reason to keep things professional, she knew she was already falling for him. The next morning brought devastating news that would change everything. The silence in Marcus's office felt suffocating as Emma stared at the photos scattered across his desk. Her hands trembled as she picked up one image after another, each one showing her father accepting envelopes from various people, including someone she now recognized as Marcus's former business partner. "Where did you get these?" Her voice barely came out as a whisper. Marcus loosened his tie, looking older than his 32 years. "A private investigator. I hired him 3 months ago when I started suspecting someone was feeding information to my competitors." He moved closer, his voice gentle despite the gravity of the situation. "Emma, I never wanted you to find out this way." "My father," Emma's voice cracked. "How much did he take?" 200,000 over 6 months. Marcus watched her face crumble. "But Emma, there's more. The investigator discovered your father was being blackmailed. Someone found out about his gambling debts and threatened to destroy your family's reputation unless he cooperated." Emma sank into the leather chair, her coffee-stained first day feeling like a lifetime ago. "That's why he's been so distant lately. Mom keeps asking what's wrong, but he won't tell her anything." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "How could I have been so blind?" Marcus knelt beside her chair, his hand hovering near hers, but not quite touching. "Because you saw the father who raised you, not the desperate man who made terrible choices. What happens now?" Emma looked up at him, her eyes red-rimmed. "Will you press charges? Will he go to prison?" The pain in Marcus's expression was unmistakable. "I should. Any other CEO would have already called the police. He stood up, running his hands through his hair. But I can't destroy the woman I love by destroying her father. Emma's heart stopped. What did you just say? Marcus froze, realizing what had slipped out. Emma, you love me? She stood up, moving toward him. Even knowing all this, even knowing what my family has done to you, especially knowing all this. Marcus turned to face her fully. Because I've watched you pour your heart into this company. I've seen your integrity, your passion, your kindness to everyone, from the janitor to the board members. You're nothing like what your father did. Emma reached up and touched his face, feeling the slight stubble on his jaw. I love you too. I've been trying to deny it, telling myself it was impossible, that we came from different worlds. We do come from different worlds, Marcus said, covering her hand with his. But maybe that doesn't matter as much as I thought it did. Their lips met in a kiss that tasted of desperation and hope. Emma melted against him, feeling like she was home for the first time in months, but reality crashed back as her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. Dad collapsed at work. We're at Mercy General Hospital. The ride to the hospital passed in a blur. Marcus drove while Emma called her mother back, learning that her father had suffered what appeared to be a heart attack during a meeting with his supervisor. The stress, the guilt, the sleepless nights had finally taken their toll. At the hospital, Emma found her mother pacing in the waiting room, her face pale with worry. Emma, thank God you're here. The doctors won't tell me anything except that he's stable. Emma hugged her mother tightly, feeling the older woman's fragile frame shake with sobs. Over her mother's shoulder, she saw Marcus hanging back, giving them space, but ready to offer support if needed. Mrs. Chen. Marcus stepped forward as Emma's mother finally noticed him. I'm Marcus Sterling, I work with Emma. I wanted to offer any assistance you might need. Emma's mother looked confused. You're very kind, Mr. Sterling, Emma filled in quietly. Mum, he's the CEO of Hartwell Industries. Recognition dawned in her mother's eyes, followed quickly by embarrassment. Oh my goodness, I'm so sorry about my appearance. I didn't expect to meet Emma's boss under these circumstances. Please don't worry about that, Marcus said warmly. Family comes first. Dr. Rodriguez emerged from the cardiac unit, still in scrubs. Mrs. Chen, your husband is awake and asking for you. It was a mild heart attack, likely stress-induced. We'll need to keep him for observation, but his prognosis says good. Relief flooded through Emma, but it was short-lived. As they walked toward her father's room, she wondered if telling him she knew about his situation would cause another attack. Her father looked small in the hospital bed, connected to monitors that beeped steadily. His eyes widened when he saw Marcus behind Emma and her mother. Emma, he whispered, his voice hoarse. What is he doing here? Dad, you need to rest, Emma said, taking his hand. Mr. Sterling drove me here. When I got Mom's call, her father's eyes darted between Emma and Marcus, fear replacing confusion. Emma, there are things you don't understand, things I need to tell you. Dad, I know. Emma squeezed his hand gently. I know about everything. The monitors started beeping faster as her father's heart rate increased. You know, how could you know? Marcus stepped forward. Mr. Chen, with your permission, I'd like to discuss a solution that could help your family. Richard, what is he talking about? Emma's mother looked between the three of them, clearly sensing undercurrents she didn't understand. Emma's father closed his eyes, tears leaking from the corners. Linda, I've done something terrible. I've put our family in danger and I've betrayed Emma's trust. Over the next hour, the painful truth came out. Emma's mother listened in stunned silence as her husband confessed to taking money, being blackmailed, and living in fear for months. She alternated between anger and heartbreak, but never once suggested leaving him. So what happens now? Emma's mother finally asked, her voice steady despite everything. Marcus pulled out a folder he'd brought from his office. I have a proposal. Mr. Chen, you'll resign from Hartwell Industries immediately and forfeit your pension to help repay what was taken. In exchange, I won't press charges, but you'll need to testify against the people who blackmailed you. That's more than generous, Emma's father said quietly. Why would you do this? Marcus looked at Emma, their eyes meeting across the small hospital room. Because sometimes love requires forgiveness, and sometimes forgiveness requires sacrifice. Emma's mother caught the look between them. Emma, is there something else going on here? Before Emma could answer, her phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and Emma answered with growing dread. "Emma, where are you? Robert Hartwell just called an emergency board meeting. He's claiming Marcus has been making unauthorized financial decisions and compromising the company's security. He wants Marcus removed as CEO immediately." Emma's blood ran cold. What kind of unauthorized decisions? He specifically mentioned a suspicious private investigator expense and unauthorized access to confidential employee files. "Emma, it sounds like he knows about your father's situation." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. Robert Hartwell wasn't just Marcus's uncle trying to reclaim control of the company. He was the one behind the blackmail scheme. "Marcus," Emma whispered, ending the call, "we need to go back to the office, now." As they raced back through the city, Marcus's phone exploded with calls from board members and reporters who had somehow already gotten wind of the story. The company stock was dropping by the minute as news of financial irregularities spread through social media. "He planned this perfectly," Marcus said grimly. "Get your father to steal information, then use my investigation into it as evidence that I'm an unstable leader who makes rash decisions. But we have proof that your uncle was behind the blackmail," Emma protested. "Proof that I obtained through potentially questionable means. Robert will argue that I overstepped my authority and violated privacy laws." Marcus's knuckles were white as he gripped the steering wheel. "Even if I'm right, the board might decide I'm too much of a liability." They arrived at Hartwell Industries to find reporters camped outside and security guards checking IDs more carefully than usual. In the elevator, Marcus straightened his tie and composed his features into the mask of corporate control Emma had first seen months ago. "Whatever happens in there," he said quietly, "I want you to know that loving you has been worth all of this." The elevator dinged softly as they reached the executive floor where Emma's new life and Marcus's entire legacy hung in the balance. Emma's hands trembled as she stared at the resignation letter on her desk. 3 weeks had passed since David's confession, and the weight of her decision pressed down on her chest like a stone. She'd avoided him completely, taking the stairs instead of elevators, eating lunch at her desk, leaving through the back exit. But running away wasn't solving anything. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. "Come in," she called, quickly sliding the letter under a file. Sarah entered, her face grave. "Emma, we need to talk. David's been asking about you constantly. The man looks like he hasn't slept in days." "That's not my problem," Emma said, but her voice lacked conviction. "Isn't it? Look, I know you're scared after what happened with Marcus. Who wouldn't be? But David isn't Marcus. He's proven that over and over." Emma's phone buzzed. A text from her landlord about overdue rent made her stomach drop. Without her expected promotion, she was struggling financially again. The irony wasn't lost on her that David's feelings had cost her the very stability she'd worked so hard to achieve. "I have to go," she said, grabbing her purse. But as she reached the elevator, the doors opened to reveal David himself. Their eyes met, and the air crackled with unspoken words. He looked exhausted, his usually perfect appearance disheveled. Other employees filed past them, creating a bubble of awkward silence. "Emma," he said quietly, "please just give me 5 minutes." "I'm late for an appointment," she lied, stepping around him. "Then I'll wait. I'll wait as long as it takes." Something in his voice made her pause. The determination, yes, but also a vulnerability she'd never heard before. Against her better judgment, she found herself stepping into his office 20 minutes later. "Thank you," he said, closing the door. "I know you don't want to be here." "You're right. I don't." Emma crossed her arms, maintaining distance. "David, what happened between us was a mistake. We worked together. You're my boss. This can't happen." "What if I wasn't?" The question hung in the air. Emma blinked. "What?" David pulled out a folder, his movements careful and deliberate. "I've been thinking about what you said, about power dynamics, about your career, about everything. You're right to be concerned." He handed her the folder. Inside were documents that made her breath catch. A transfer request to the London office, a promotion to senior marketing director, his signature already in place. "I'm taking the London position," he said quietly. "It's been offered to me for months. I kept turning it down because of you. But if my being here makes it impossible for you to feel comfortable, then I'll go." Emma stared at the papers, her mind reeling. "You'd leave? Give up everything here? For you? Yes, without hesitation. His voice was steady, but she could see his hands shaking. Emma, I'm not asking you to choose me. I'm not asking you for anything. I just needed you to know that your comfort, your peace of mind, your career, they matter more to me than my own convenience. Tears blurred her vision. This wasn't what she'd expected. Marcus had always put his needs first, had manipulated and controlled. But David was literally offering to remove himself from the equation entirely. When would you leave? She whispered. 2 weeks, if you want me to. The weight of his sacrifice hit her like a physical blow. He was willing to uproot his entire life, leave his family, his friends, everything familiar, because she'd expressed discomfort. It was the most selfless thing anyone had ever done for her. David, she started, but her phone rang. The hospital. Her father's condition had worsened. Without thinking, she answered, her face draining of color as she listened. David was at her side instantly, his hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. What happened? He asked when she hung up. Dad's in the ICU. They don't know if... She couldn't finish the sentence. Come on. David was already reaching for his coat. I'll drive you. You don't have to... Emma, please. Just this once, let someone take care of you. The 40-minute drive to the hospital passed in a blur. David held her hand while she cried, pulled over when she needed air, bought her coffee and food she couldn't eat. He didn't. Tried to talk, didn't offer empty platitudes. He was just there, solid and dependable. At the hospital, he stayed in the waiting room while she went to see her father. The man she loved was barely conscious, tubes and machines keeping him alive. The doctor's prognosis was grim. Dad, she whispered, taking his frail hand. I'm here. His eyes fluttered open, focusing on her with effort. Emma, my girl, you look tired. I'm okay, Dad. Save your strength. That young man in the waiting room, he cares about you. Emma's breath caught. How did you... The way he looked at you. Same way I looked at your mother. Her father's voice was weak, but certain. Life's short, sweetheart. Don't waste it being afraid. 3 hours later, after her father had stabilized enough for her to leave, Emma found David exactly where she'd left him, coffee cups and magazine evidence of his long vigil. How is he? David asked, standing immediately. Better, stable. Emma sank into the chair beside him, emotionally drained. David, you didn't have to stay. You've been here for hours. Where else would I be? The simple response broke something open inside her chest. Where else would he be? With his family, his friends, handling important business calls. Instead, he'd spent his evening in a hospital waiting room because she needed support. The London job, she said suddenly. Don't take it. David's expression was carefully neutral. Emma, you don't have to. I love you too. The words escaped before she could stop them, raw and honest in the sterile hospital air. David's face transformed, hope and disbelief warring in his expression. You don't have to say that because... I'm not. David, watching you tonight, seeing how you've handled everything, how you put my needs before your own, I've been an idiot. I let fear make my decisions instead of my heart. She turned to face him fully, taking his hands in hers. Yes, there will be complications. Yes, people will talk. Yes, it's messy and complicated and scary. But you know what's scarier? The thought of you leaving. The thought of losing this. Losing us. Because I was too afraid to take a chance. David's thumb traced across her knuckles. Are you sure? Really sure? Because Emma, if we do this, I'm all in. I don't do things halfway. I don't want halfway, she said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. I want messy and complicated and real. I want you. David kissed her then, gentle and sweet in the harsh fluorescent lighting. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. So what happens now? He asked. Now we figure it out together. But first, I think you should meet my father properly. He wants to thank the man who drove his daughter to the hospital. He knows about us. Emma laughed, the sound lighter than she'd felt in weeks. Apparently, fathers have excellent intuition about these things. 6 months. Later, Emma stood in David's apartment, their apartment now, watching him attempt to cook dinner. She'd transferred to the international division, reporting to the London office remotely, which had solved their immediate workplace concerns. The arrangement gave her more flexibility and, surprisingly, had accelerated her career. You know, she said, wrapping her arms around him from behind, For a CEO, you're remarkably bad at following recipes. Hey, the pasta is only slightly overcooked, he protested, leaning back into her embrace. Besides, you're distracting me. Good, she murmured against his neck, making him shiver. Her father, fully recovered and thrilled with their relationship, called it divine intervention. You spilled coffee on your soulmate, he'd told her just last week. How's that for destiny? David turned in her arms, his eyes soft in the kitchen light. Any regrets? He asked, a question that had become their evening ritual. Just one, Emma said seriously. David's face fell slightly until she continued, grinning. I should have spilled coffee on you sooner. He laughed, the sound rich and warm, and kissed her forehead. Well, we'll have to remember that for the story we tell our kids someday. Our kids? Emma raised an eyebrow. Someday when you're ready if you want them. David's cheeks flushed slightly. I just mean, David, she interrupted, standing on her toes to kiss him quiet. Someday sounds perfect. Outside, rain began to fall, but inside their small apartment, surrounded by overcooked pasta and dreams of the future, Emma had never felt warmer. Sometimes the best love stories began with the messiest beginnings, and sometimes taking a leap of faith led to the softest landing of all. The coffee stain on her old blouse, now framed in their bedroom, served as a daily reminder that love often arrived in the most unexpected ways, and as David pulled her close, spinning her around their tiny kitchen while their dinner burned forgotten on the stove, Emma knew that some spills were worth making.